right, since the last lesson, I've gone ahead and added more coins and more enemies into my game level. If I go ahead and zoom out, you'll be able to see a whole lot more coins. In fact, there are 30 coins in all scattered around the game level. There's lots of enemies, so my game level is pretty much complete. So in this lesson, we're actually not going to focus on our game level at all. Instead, in this lesson, we're going to focus on game menus. In this lesson, we're going to make 3 menus: a title screen, a game over screen for when you lose, and a you win screen for when you collect all the coins in the game level. What's new in this lesson? Well, in a word, buttons. Buttons need to be on every game menu screen, so when you're on your game title screen, you can click the play button, and obviously if you're on the game over or you win screen, you can press play again or back to the main menu. But let's go ahead and jump in. To make a game menu, I'm going to go ahead and make a new scene by pressing the plus button up here, of course. When you make a menu screen, it is a 2D screen, so I'm going to switch over to my 2D workspace here, and of course, if I go ahead and zoom in, of course I can press this little plus here, and then middle mouse to orbit down, so I can hopefully see, if I zoom out a little bit, all of that rectangle of my game screen. If you actually click on the percentage that you're zoomed in by, it'll snap you to an even 100%. That's a nice little shortcut to know. In my case, I can't quite see, I don't think, all the game screen. Oh, yeah, there it is. That's great. To start off a menu screen, you're actually going to make what's called a control node. A control node, I'll go ahead and press this plus button to add a node, is the root node of the branch that contains all of the green user interface elements that you would typically use in, well, a game menu. In this case, we're going to start off with a control node, which is exactly what you get when you press this user interface button. So go ahead and press that to make your root node of the scene a control node. I'll go ahead and name this node menu title. I like making all of my menu screens menu title, menu game over, menu win, starting with the word menu, so I can easily find them all together in my file system doc, and I know what they're named that way. With the root node selected, I'm going to go ahead and press plus because our menu needs a background color. Under the control node branch of all of our available nodes here, we can add what's called a color rectangle, or a color rect for short. I'll go ahead and double click on that. When we add a color rect node, you can see it gives you a little square of the color white, and you can drag the corner of this square or rectangle out to fill up that entire game window. And in fact, I'm going to drag it out so it's just a little bit larger, and I'll drag it up a little bit so it's just beyond on all 4 sides the edges of that game rectangle for my screen. To change its color, obviously with it selected, you go up to the properties in the inspector, and the first property is the color. So go ahead and click on this color picker, and I like using hue, saturation, and value to pick a color. I'm going to make my title screen have a background color of kind of a dark purple to kind of match the color of my world tiles, which matches the theme of my game. So I kind of like this dark purple. What else is going to go on this title screen? Well, text, the name of your game. So I'm going to go and select my root node. I'll press plus, and I'm going to add a label into my scene. A label just like when we made the heads up display in our game level up at the top left of the screen. We added a piece of text up there that showed us how many coins we have collected. We did that using a label as well, so it might be in your recents list. It is for me. I'll go ahead and add a label into my game menu, and I'll make the rectangle of the label much bigger because in its text property in the inspector, I'm going to type the name of my game. I'm not going to be very creative about this at all. I'm going to name my game 3D Platformer, in all caps, game. There we go. Now, when you add text into the text property of a label, it does not get a very interesting font. It's the default font. So what we'll need to do is go ahead and get a font file from the internet. So I recommend that you head on over to Google Fonts. Is a great place that you can find fonts. I've talked about this website before, fonts.google.com. Or another one is Font Library. Fontlibrary.org is a great site for free fonts as well. Just make sure that whichever font site that you go to get your fonts, that you read the usage rules, the copyright rules of the font that you're using in your game, if you plan on publishing your game, which I hope you do. In my case, I found a font on fontlibrary.org called Curie Font. When I downloaded this font file, I believe it was in a zip file, so of course I had to unzip it, and I actually have that font file here on my desktop. It's called curiefont.ttf. I'll go ahead and select that file. I'll copy it, right click and copy, and I'll go into my game project folder, into my assets folder, where of course I'm organizing all of the assets that I'm using in my game. Therefore, I have a fonts folder from earlier in this course where I pasted the font for that heads-up display for the coin counter on the screen. I'll go ahead and right click and paste the font file into here that I'm using for my game menu, and back into Godot with the label selected. I'll go over to the inspector, and down in the section called Theme Overrides under Fonts, we can enable a custom font, not by turning on this font yet. We can't do that until we drag in a font file into the empty slot here. So I'll go into my assets folder in the file system doc, and under fonts, I'll find Curie Font, drag it in there, and it becomes enabled by default. And now it's using that Curie font. It looks good, but it's way too small and it's not the right color. So I'll go over to my font sizes under theme overrides, where if I enable it and then type in a bigger number, like 120, it's going to make my text a whole lot bigger. I'll make it a little bit smaller. 100, is that going to work? No, I'm going to try 70. And I kind of like the look of that. Now, my font needs a color. So under colors, I can enable the font color. And once I enable it, I can change it from black to, I'll go ahead and change my color picker to hue, saturation, and value. I'll use a bright, to contrast with the dark background, a bright pinky purpley color, I think, kind of like that. And if I want to make the title a little bit more splashy, I might even take the rotate tool and rotate it a little bit like that. And then I can use the arrow tool again to move it. Is there a shadow option for the text if I want it to stand out even more from the background? There sure is. If I enable font shadow color and choose a color, I'll go to hue, saturation, and value, pick a color, a saturation, and turn it up. I want a nice yellow color here for the shadow. You can just see that shadow peeking out behind the text. And I think under constants, under theme override colors, there's a constant section where I can enable the shadow offset values, and I can tune these up and down to however I want the shadows to look. I might want my shadow to go down instead of up. I kind of like that. So on this menu screen, this title screen, I want a picture of my robot and the main game characters, so my player, the human playing my game, knows what the game is all about. The easiest way to do that is to actually just have a rendered out picture of whatever you want on the title screen in a picture format, like a PNG picture file. In my case, on my desktop here, I have 3 pictures. One of them is for this title screen. This is it. It has a checkerboard background, of course, because it's a PNG with transparent areas, so it'll work nicely in a game engine and be transparent and not just a big white rectangle, which wouldn't be good. I also have on my desktop here a picture for my You Win screen when you collect all the coins, and a picture for the game over screen if you get hit by an enemy or if you fall off the edge of a cliff. This will be it. I'll go ahead and give all of these pictures to you. You can go ahead and download these for yourself in a zip file and then unzip them. And then I'll go ahead and select those files and right click on them and say copy. In my project folder here, I'm going to go into my assets folder, into the images folder, and then I will right click and paste those pictures into that folder. Okay, so now back into the Godot editor, I'm going to select my root node and I'll press plus to add a new node. Do you recall how to add a picture into a game menu? Well, we've actually used this node before to add that little coin into our coin HUD. It's not a sprite node. You could find that sprite node in Node 2D, and it is in alphabetical order, I believe. It is down here. It's called Sprite 2D. You would add this kind of a picture into a 2D game, but when you're making a menu, you'll use instead, under the green control node branch, you'll use what's called a texture rectangle. Right there. I have it in my recents as well. So I'll go ahead and add a texture rectangle into my game menu screen. Now I'm going to leave this texture rectangle alone. I'm not going to scale it at all until, with it selected, I go ahead into my images folder and I drag that image screen title PNG into, I'll go ahead and drag it into the texture empty slot of the texture rectangle and let go. To scale the size of the picture to be smaller than it currently is, you have to change the expand mode from keep size to ignore size. Do that before trying to stretch anything at all, because then you can hold shift and scale it proportionally. I think I'm going to make the shadows here, which are a little bit cut off, right at the edge of my screen there. And then if I drag the top corner while holding shift, I'll make the robot just overlap a little bit, which will make it look kind of more dynamic and 3D with some depth over top of some letters. So I think that looks pretty good like that. I need to add next my play button over here, which the user will click to start playing the game, and therefore my scene will switch over to level 1. To make a button, I'm going to select the root node of my menu screen, and I'm going to press plus. There is actually a whole category of different types of buttons under the control node, and then under base button, and then under button, there's a whole bunch of different types of buttons. We're just going to use the plain type of button here, just called button, which is actually a branch of its own. But if we select the root node of that branch and press create, it'll make the generic type of button that we want. If I go ahead and make this button bigger, you can see that it doesn't look very good. It's a dark gray rectangle. Don't worry, we'll make it look better. What I'm going to do is move it over to where I want the button to actually be for play. And with it selected, it's a lot like a label in that it has a text property here. So if I type in all caps, play, it'll say play on my button. A lot like a label, you need to go down to the theme override section under fonts to give it a font to make it look the way that you want. In this case, I'm going to use my Francois 1 font from my heads up display instead of the same font as my game title, and I'll drag in that Francois font into the empty font field here. And like before, I can go ahead and change my font size right below to about, I'm going to say 30, maybe something like 50 instead. This rectangle of the button will determine where the user can actually click on the button to activate it. So it's up to you if you want to make the button quite small or big. But again, we're not going to have, if you don't want, the dark rectangle around the button, because generally in games, buttons are just text and not something that's visual more than just text that changes color. If you don't want the rectangle there, you can go up in the inspector with the button selected and turn on this flat option. If you turn flat on, it'll just be the text. Okay, which is nice. If you want the text to have color, which I do, of course, you can go down to theme overrides and colors, except buttons have more options. You can have a color for a button just as normal, or you can have the font change color whenever the user presses on the button or whenever the user hovers their mouse over top of the button. So a little hover effect, which is kind of nice and makes it interactive. So I'm going to change the font color to just the plain font color of how it will look without any interaction at all. I'll use hue, saturation, and value, and I always use for play, like an old VCR or a DVD player. I'm dating myself here. A green play kind of a color, greeny yellow. There we go. For hover, I'm going to make it, I think, a yellowy color to match my theme. So here we go. I'll turn up the saturation and value and play around with the hue here. That looks pretty good. Do I want there to be a pressed color? I think so. When you click, it'll flash a color as it's switching to another screen, the game menu. So my press color is just going to be, I think, white to keep it simple. Let's see how this looks. I'll go ahead and press Control S to save this scene. We haven't saved it yet. It's calling it menu title because of my root node's name. That's great. If I press play scene, here it is. We've got a menu. I think I might want to make the graphic a bit bigger, or maybe move the play button over. The spacing and the layout and the balance isn't quite right. But you can see when I hover my mouse over the button, it changes color. And when I click, it flashes white. Now, what I don't really like with Godot buttons is that they have this default outline, and it took me quite a while to figure out how to get rid of this. It turns out that this will actually be in your game, and I don't like the look of it because your button, in this case, we want to make it look just like text. To get rid of that pesky outline, what you can do is under Theme Overrides, under the Styles section, we can change a little bit of the theme for focused items. You might notice that in Godot in general, when you select a button, it gets an outline, or when you select anything, it gets an outline. And that's exactly what's happening, because if you weren't aware, the Godot editor is actually made itself using the same code that you have access to. All the same classes, all the same nodes are used to make Godot that you use to make your game. It's a little bit recursive and self-referential. I'm not sure. So if you make under or next to focus a new style box flat style, you can override some of the basic things about things that are in focus. That means they've been interacted with and clicked on by the user by making a new style box flat for focused items. So I'll do that, new style box flat, and then I can click on style box flat to change some of its properties. What happens right now? I've made this new style box flat. It has default properties set up with it. If I go ahead and save and then play this menu screen, yeah, you can see that it's taking on this gray background for the background color of that item. I don't want that, so I'm going to turn that off here. I'll click on the color picker, and I'm going to choose black and transparent. Alpha means transparency, so if I turn this down to 0, it'll be totally transparent. That should fix that problem. But now we can go down to this border section, and we'll do the same thing. The color of the border, we'll change it to black and transparent. That should do it. Okay, if I go ahead and save and press play scene, now when I click on a button, there's no pesky outline. That took me a while to figure out. Okay, so now we want the play button to actually jump from this screen over to the level when we click on the button. How do we do that? Well, the answer is signals. When you select a button and go over to the node doc, this node doc lists signals, which are common events for that type of an item. In this case, the button type has a pressed signal listed in it. If I move my mouse, there it is. So I need to add a script file into this scene to make the signal be able to call a function that we write. So I'm going to select the root node of my menu screen, and I'm going to add a script to it called menutitle.gd. That's fine. I'll press create. Now that I have this script file, I actually don't need any of the default functions that come with it. So I'll get rid of everything in the code file except for extends control. Now, if I go back to my 2D workspace and select the button and then go and add, I'll go ahead and double click on the pressed signal. It's going to make a new function called onButtonPressed that will respond to that pressed event. So I'll go ahead and press connect. It's going to put it in that script file that we just added. So I'll press connect. There it is. What do we want to have happen when we press the play button? We want to switch scenes. To do that, hopefully you can recall what we type here. It is get_tree dot change scene to file. I'll go ahead and use autocomplete and press enter. And then I'll maximize my workspace. I want to use my down arrow key and select one of the TSCN files, in this case level1.tscn. I'll press enter. That should work. I'll go ahead and press Control S to save. I'll go back to my menu title screen. I'll unmaximize my workspace and I'll look at my 2D scene here and I'll press play scene. Now when I see my title screen, I can press play and it jumps me over into my game level and I can play my game. Great. The next steps are to create two basically identically constructed scenes for my game over screen and my you win screen. I'm not going to go through all of those steps because they are identical to what I just did. So I'm going to speed this next part of the video up. Here we go. Okay, so I have my title screen, I have my game over screen, and I have my you win screen all finished. All of the buttons work, so if I quickly test out my game over screen, you can see how it looks, and I can press the main menu button and it goes back to the main menu. The same thing is true with the you win screen. If I play to test out that scene, I can press main menu and it goes back to that screen. Speaking of that main menu screen, actually, it needs to be our main scene in our game project. When you finish your game and publish it, it needs to have set in your project a main first scene to go to when you just start up your game. If you go up to not the play scene button, but the play button, well, we've never used that button before because it's always asked you to set a default scene for your project. And now that we have this title screen, we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and press select here after pressing the play button. And when I press select, it's going to ask me to choose a scene. Of course, I'm going to choose my menu title.tscn here. I'll select it and press open. Now my title screen is my default scene, so now from this point on, I don't have to press play scene to start my whole project. Instead, no matter which scene I have currently up in my workspace, even if I have level 1 active on my screen, I can still simply now press play and it'll start my project from the first default scene like this. So now I can go ahead and press play to start my game. If you make a mistake and you set the wrong scene as the default scene, and then from that point on, this play button doesn't go to your title menu screen, you can simply change that in your project settings. If I go up to project and project settings, under the general tab here, down under application and run, you can see that there is a main scene here, and you can simply reset it if you made the wrong scene choice here, or you can pick a new scene right here. Okay, the last few steps are to make our game go to the correct game over screen and the you win screen, depending on what happens in your game. If I collide with an enemy in my game, right now I simply restart my game level, and the same thing is true with my fall zone if I fall off the edge of a platform. Let's go ahead and solve those two problems. If I go to any enemy script over here in my scene doc, I'll go into my enemies folder, and on any enemy here, I'll click on its script, and I'm going to find the function called onSides checker body entered. Right here on my line 43, this is where we're checking to see if the character, the robot, hits the side of the enemy. Right now, that means we are going to reset the scene to level 1. I don't want that anymore. I want to change this. I'll go ahead and delete everything, including the quotes. And if I type new quotes there, it'll prompt me with a list of all of the TSCN files in my project. In my case, I'll use the down arrow key and select this time menu game over right there, and I'll press enter. It's as simple as that. If I go ahead and save that code file, the next code file I want to edit is for the fall zone. If I go back to my 3D workspace and I'll go and select my Steve character's script, because when we touch the fall zone, the code for handling that, the function that is called by the fall zone signal, isn't actually on the fall zone because there is no code on the fall zone. It's on Steve. So if I go to Steve's code and then go down to the function at the bottom called onFallZoneBodyEntered, entered, I don't want to go to level1.tscn anymore. I'll do the same thing. I'll retype my quotes. It'll give me a prompting list of all the scene files in my project. I'll go to the menu game over screen like that. I'll do a quick save. Let's go ahead and test that out. I'll go up to my play button this time. I don't have to worry about being on the right tab anymore with the play button. I go straight to my game menu. I'll go ahead and press play. And if I hit an enemy, I go to game over. If I press main menu, I'll go back to main menu, and I'll press play again. If I jump off the edge of a platform and hit that fall zone, I should go to game over as well. It works. Now, when it comes to winning my game, I have to collect all 30 coins in my game level in my global script file, which is called global.gd. Where is it? It's right here. I have it selected actually. I'll go ahead and open that up because this global file is where we set up the number of coins that is required to win the game. And before this lesson, I went and changed this number to 30. However, I'm going to change it temporarily. I'll comment out 30 and I'll make it simply 2 here. So you only have to win by collecting 2 coins in the game. I'll change that back, but let's go ahead and save that. Where is the code to actually check to see if you have this number of coins to win? It's on every single coin. So if I go to any coin script, I have here an onBodyEntered function, which is run whenever a physical body like our character enters our coin, which is an area 3D. Well, this code is run. You can see here if global.coins is greater than or equal to global.numCoins to win, we go to level 1. I don't want that to be the case anymore. I'll go ahead and replace all of that, the path to the scene file I want to go to. I'll put new double quotes and I'll use the down arrow key just like before, but this time I'll select the menu game win tscn file. There we go. I'll go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and test it out. If I go ahead and press play, it'll take me to the game menu. I'll press play. This time I only have to collect 2 coins to win, and I've won the game. If I go back to the main menu and go back and press play, my coins is reset to 0 again, and of course I could win the game again by collecting 2 coins. There we go. Of course, I'll want to change that number in my global.gd file back to 30. So back into global.gd, I'll change that number back to 30 and save it. There we go. Okay, that's going to be it for this lesson. As always, I'll try to leave for you up on the screen at the end of this video the relevant code from this lesson, which in this case was for our menu screens making a button work. So if I go ahead and select the button in any game menu, you can see that under my node doc, the pressed signal is connected to a function. The function is on the root node of that menu. And if I go to that script file, you can see that there's a function on button pressed, which simply changes your scene to a different scene file. That's it. As always, thank you so much for watching and for making it to the end of this lesson. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.